comrade of mine for many years, and a great mentor of mine, if I may say so too. And thank you very much for the invitation, Madam Auditor, and it gives me great pleasure to say those words, especially as just last Friday we celebrated the 50th anniversary of women being admitted to the Hist. And actually, what I think was particularly shocking for all of us who had the pleasure of being at the celebration on Friday night was that it is only 50 years, that women weren't admitted to the Hist until 1969, and that generations of women who had come to Trinity as students had actually not been allowed, not even just to speak or to be officers of the Hist, but not even to attend the debates at the Hist. The reason being that women were viewed, in the words of one infamous provost, as a danger to the men. They would be a distraction to men. They would also endanger their own womanly virtues or attributes, and so on. So there was a really deep-rooted sexism, a very patriarchal view of women that as deserving of somehow of protection, of special treatment in this way, that kept women out of these hallowed walls for many decades. And finally then, of course, that changed in 1969, and we heard from wonderful former women officers like Mary Harney, first woman auditor of the Hist, and others on Friday night. So that was a real treat. But it did make me think that tonight's debate is therefore very timely. And I'm delighted as well that you're collecting for the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. I think that's really positive. But it is very timely to reflect on the Me Too movement, to speak about it, about whether or not it's succeeded. Of course, as proposition, I'm determined to prove to you that the Me Too movement is succeeding. I think there is strong evidence of that. I'm going to lay that out in the few minutes I have. But I think also we have to be cognizant of the fact that it hasn't yet succeeded. So I think that's important. As a lawyer, of course, I would make that semantic distinction, but it's a very important distinction because clearly there are still there's still a huge amount left to do. To coin a phrase that Joan and I are familiar with from a different political party, a lot done more to do on the issue of sexual harassment. And what I would say, though, I think, is that where Me Too is succeeding is in highlighting the hugely pervasive nature of sexual harassment across different countries, across different ages, across different generations, just how pervasive sexual harassment generally committed by men against women is. Not always, but generally. Why? Because it's a feature of power. It's a feature of a power imbalance in society. The same power imbalance that kept women out of the Hist for decades, and the same power imbalance that has kept women out of politics for so long means that we're still only at 22% in the Dáil and 30% in the Seanad. So, you know, it's that same manifestation, it's a different manifestation of the same power imbalance. And I speak as somebody who until last year, certainly I never talked publicly about my own experience of harassment. I did that last year. In fact, I did speak about it. It wasn't particularly unusual or unique, as most women, if not all women, know. This is something that happens so regularly, it's not even remarkable anymore. And, you know, many of us have been harassed over years in different ways. The very particular example that I spoke about last summer at a different forum, not the Phil, a different forum entirely. It was about, as a student, same age as many of you are now, waitressing in London one summer, where we had a manager who was notorious, a male manager who was notorious, and it was well known among the young women waitresses there, and we were all young women, the waitresses, that you didn't go into the staff room on your own with this guy. Why? Because he would be all over you. And it was absolutely horrible, and it was something we all just put up with. And of course, nobody dreamt of saying a word about it to anyone above, well, first of all, he was the manager, but secondly, you'd lose your job, you'd be in trouble, and so on. So it's just so pervasive. But a lot of men I know, really great men, male friends, some of my best friends are men, of course, I can say that, including my partner, who's the reason I can be here, because he's at home with the children. You know, men don't actually understand that, I think, because why? It's not been visible to them. And that's where Me Too has really been succeeding, because for the first time, men are having the conversation. We're able to have the conversation with our male colleagues and friends and co-workers about harassment and about the endemic and pervasive nature of it, about how it is a manifestation of power imbalance. And let's be clear, it's the least powerful women who are harassed by the more powerful men. okay? It is about power. You know, I don't tend to experience it anymore. But, you know, I'm at a very different place in my life and in my work. But certainly for women, I'm very conscious, for young women, for women who are powerless, working in catering, working in low-pay sector, working in precarious jobs, that's where harassment is still going on. It's still all around us. And that's where Me Too hasn't yet succeeded, but is succeeding in highlighting it. So this conversation is itself hugely transformative of the way in which we relate to each other as women and as men in Irish society and in different societies where Me Too has had an impact already. And we know that the Me Too movement is about 18 months old, although there's lots of dispute about when did it actually begin. Tarana Burke, the US activist, originally coined the phrase Me Too much longer ago than that, back in 2006. However, Alyssa Milano came forward in October 2017, first to break a silence about particular harassment within a Hollywood context, and we all know that had a huge reaction. She sent a tweet saying, anyone who'd been sexually harassed or assaulted should reply to her tweet with Me Too to demonstrate the scale of the problem. 500,000 people responded in the first 24 hours. So that was really, you know, the first, I suppose, indication that this was a huge phenomenon that could go global in an age of social media. And Time magazine then named the silence breakers on sexual harassment as Person of the Year, or People of the Year more accurately, in 2017. And around the same time, in late 2017, we saw the movement also, Me Too, also becoming a phenomenon publicly in Ireland. But, you know, there'd been an earlier manifestation of it through the Waking the Feminists campaign, which many of you may remember, started out around late 2015, where a group of women working in theatre, working in the arts, came forward to protest about the exclusion of women from the Abbey Centenary Programme. The Abbey Theatre Centenary Programme for 2016 had an absence of women among the directors. And it was an absence that was entirely invisible to those who had planned the programme, as much of this is. This is a sort of structural invisibility, what I've called a kind of a selective lack of visibility about women's absence. We see it, they don't. I remember watching a video from the European Commission a few years ago about the workings of the Commission, and it was glaringly obvious to me, and I could see to every other woman in the audience, that there were no women in the programme. They were in the background occasionally, but there was no woman speaking in this programme that was supposed to highlight the work of the Commission. And we all commented on afterwards. Clearly it had been utterly invisible to the people who'd made the film. So this is a problem when you don't have power, is that you are invisible to those who do, and they don't see your absence. And so this continues to be an issue. But certainly the Abbey, the Waking the Feminist movement, as it became called, had a huge meeting in the Abbey Theatre. I was proud to have been asked to be one of the facilitators, first and probably the only time in my life I'll get to stand on the Abbey Theatre and perform, although my performance was, critics mightn't have been too keen on it. It was very straightforward. I simply just introduced the speakers. But it was a really, again, hugely pivotal moment, has changed things visibly in the way theatre and the arts are run in Ireland, and has certainly changed the way in which programming is carried out, curating is carried out. That was hugely important. And then, of course, we saw in October 2017, subsequent to that, Grace Dias coming forward very courageously and naming sexual harassment against the former director of One Dublin Theatre, The Gate, and so on. So we've seen, you know, very much visible change coming about because of the Me Too movement here. It's influenced many other victims and survivors to speak out in less public ways too. And, you know, just looking at some of the statistics, September 2018, Crime Victims Helpline Annual Report, the number of people contacting the service about rape or sexual assault in 2017 had more than doubled over the previous year. 2018, Central Statistics Office crime figures, 10% rise in sex offence allegations since 2017. I'm somebody who practiced criminal defence law for many years, and we'd be well aware that many sex offence allegations made relate to historic cases, so they would have related to cases in the past. The Me Too movement was clearly not the only catalyst in this increase in reporting, and the Belfast rape trial, about which Conor reported, and which had such a fundamental impact upon so many, and generated a whole I Believe Her movement here. That clearly also had a catalysing effect, as did in the past different allegations and different reports around abuse in institutions. These are all things that encourage and support survivors of abuse to come forward and disclose their abuse. So Me Too is one of the things that has brought about this change, but of course there have been others around the same time. I suppose to conclude, where else is it succeeding? I think we can say patently it's succeeded in raising the issue, in highlighting the issue, in dare I say, educating men about the pervasive nature of harassment. What else has it done? It has led to change in the law. And already we've seen, and again, I've written about elsewhere about the sort of changes we've seen in our laws, even just in 2017 through the enactment of new legislation on sex offences, and also in an increase in cases of harassment coming forward before the Workplace Relations Commission. Final thing I leave you with is the Me Too movement also should remind us that many harassment cases are not criminal offences. So while there's been an increase in allegations about crime, clearly a great deal of harassment goes on under the radar, not criminalised, not in fact capable of being prosecuted, but still at a workplace level very much capable of being litigated and very much encroaching upon the rights of employees in the workplace. And that's where we need to do more, and that's where Me Too, I think, still has some way to go before we can achieve success and before women and men are truly equal in Irish society. Thank you.